Ngamagantin takay tumata akamat kanti amarkesi bokudi face nawakati bokudi face ki gamata isai.
This is Gubi. He is a member of what most anthropologists consider the oldest human community on Earth, the Basara of Africa, otherwise known as the Bushman of the Kalahari. For most of his life, he lived in an area of Botswana now known as the Central Kalahari Game Reserve, surviving in the same way his ancestors had done for thousands of years, by hunting and gathering. The Bushmen have very close ties to the desert. Hunting and gathering form the backbone of their culture. Ngubi used to roam freely across the borders of Botswana and Namibia, hunting wild game. But all that changed in 1997 when the Botswana government began installing fences to stop unauthorized border crossings.
That's what that come
Ngubi explains to me how he was out hunting one day and wandered into Namibia. When he tried to return to Botswana, he was detained. Botswana border police demanded proof of citizenship before they would allow him back into the country. Ngubi had no papers. He has remained in Namibia ever since. His story is not unique. Since the mid-1990s, the Botswana government has been systematically moving the Bushmen out of their ancestral lands on the game reserve. The government says they are moving the Bushmen out for their own good. Government representatives say they want to provide services like healthcare and education, and claims that it is impossible to provide these services because the game reserve is too remote.
They are persuaded to relocate. But we do not have, Jeff, understand me to be saying, we do not have a specific policy which is directed at indigenous people. We do not officially regard them as an indigenous sector of our population.
And that lack of policy is part of the problem, according to the United Nations. Professor James Anaya traveled extensively through the Greater Kalahari Game Reserve on a fact-finding mission for the UN in 2009.
The problem is the development model is one which isn't entirely in sync with or consistent with the apparent aspirations of these people to maintain their own cultural identities. They've been moved off their traditional lands, where they historically, traditionally have been able to live from the resources of those lands according to their own ways of life and cultural patterns.
Because the Botswana government does not consider any people as indigenous, it says that the Bushmen have no legal claim on the land. Separated from his ancestral lands and no longer able to support his family, Ngubi felt his culture was dying. Then he had a vision.
Maman tu akan kong kamu iku ijai be tong kai ji au an ai ka kai nga tui ngai sen ku pa ma ngai nda ku tu ki te dai ka kai ko se su se te nga pu ma le ko da.
Ngubi's vision has led the family to perform at places like this market in Johannesburg, where I met them. He feels if he can go out into the world and share his music and dancing, people will understand the Bushman's problem, and his culture will be preserved. They are paid a small fee, but they can never leave the desert for very long. To better understand their situation, Ngubi says I must make the 1,500-kilometer journey back with them to Namibia. Because of its isolation, Ngubi's relocation corridor is a virtual prison. There is no access to public utilities. Water is pumped from a well over 2 kilometers away. There are no heaters, no stoves. They are restricted to an area too small to support themselves by hunting and gathering, and must resort to raising a few head of livestock to make a living. The Botswana government has come under harsh criticism from the United Nations for their treatment of the San Bushman and what it calls the spectacle of one of the greatest cultures of Africa being placed under severe threat.
They're threatened already, and they'll be even more threatened and with extinction as a culture. I mean, that's what's at stake.
Ngubi claims he has tried to contact the government several times, asking for permission to cross back and forth between the border, but has received no reply. For now, the only thing Ngubi and his family can do is work to preserve the Bushman's traditions by sharing their culture and music.